meet and greet with Councilman Johnson next week, and we're looking to reach out to another candidate as well. So thank you guys so much for attending. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them to our guests, and let's have a great night. Thank you. Mr. Brewer.
So can I put this on Facebook Live?
Yeah.
Do I hold it like this?
No, somebody will hold it. I'll hold it.
Hold it for him. Hold it for
You
him.
can't hold it and talk to us.
Multitasking.
Really?
Facebook Live, smart. All right.
I'm not doing it live, but I'm videoing and it will go up on Walk the Board.
Well, fine. We'll just let you do that.
Okay.
Mama, you already know. I got you. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Let me more Larry.
Yes.
So first of all, thanks for the invitation. They said, where should I stand so it's easier so I can
All right there.
Are you sure? You wanted you to be here so we can
Let me
Turn. Then we had a turn.
hold on. So,
This is like a commercial endorsement. All right, so I'm running for mayor of Cleveland. I don't know why. It was an act of lunacy, I think, when I decided to wake up and take on this challenge. So many of you have been reading my Facebook page over the last 5 years, and there was all this encouragement coming that this was something I should at least think about. And I kept saying, no, I'm not going to ever run for elected office again. Not that I didn't have an interest in it, but it just wasn't what I thought was one of the plans that God had for me. So I chose to continue to share on Facebook, thinking that by giving you all insight into some of the issues from an inside perspective. I'm a journalist first, a publisher first, a politician second, and no journalist has really gone inside and come out and share information with the general public from an inside perspective, which is why I've always used codes and that kind of information to enlighten you, basically thinking in my mind is I gave you the source documents, you go look it up yourself, and you can use the information. Tamir Rice, actually it was Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams. That separated it for me. I got back in 2012. Frank was running for re-election. I think Ken Lansing was in that race. I know both of them, they asked me each to support them in that race. What Ken wanted me to do was beat up on Frank for him. He was going to pay me a nice piece of cash. Frank wanted me to beat up on Ken for him, and he was going to pay me a nice piece of cash. But since I knew both of them and had become acclimated to the Jackson administration's efforts here in Cleveland, I decided to stay out of the race and try to retain my friendship with both of them. So I've done that. But with the Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams slaughter in East Cleveland, that hit me hard because it was my city. And I had left East Cleveland with an order for the police that if another police department came into East Cleveland and somebody died or property was damaged, those police officers were to be arrested. So in my mind, as I saw Cleveland police officers, 100 of them chase 2 people into East Cleveland and then go behind Heritage Middle School, where my brothers and sisters attended middle school, next to the McGregor Nursing Home and homes with homeowners I knew, I thought this was outrageous. When I saw, at that time, Jeffrey Fulmer was the president of the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association. And when I saw Fulmer show up at the crime scene, I'm thinking, what the hell business does he have as a union representative in East Cleveland? He controls nothing in East Cleveland. And the East Cleveland police should have put him out of the city. They didn't. They should have arrested all 13 police officers who fired, and then had the others who were in the city disarm themselves, take off their fucking shirts, excuse my language, and act like the civilians that they were, because they were no longer law enforcement officers.
You did promise you weren't our cousin, right?
That wasn't cussing, that was French.
I did see that close.
Parlez-vous français? I know cuss words in French too, Thai cuss words too, but I don't cuss in English if I do. But the But what happened was seeing those officers there and the inaction on East Cleveland's part said to me that something was wrong. And when I saw Ralph Spots in Cleveland the next day with Calvin and Frank controlling the flow of information, and they were no longer in East Cleveland's jurisdiction, where this was a crime that had been committed against the residents of East Cleveland, I knew something was wrong at that point. Gary Norton, of course, replaced me. I didn't think that he had the courage or the insight to be the mayor the way he should have been. And that was another signal for me that, and it really separated my relationship with Frank in terms of being a supporter of his administration. The next thing that got me was Tamir Rice. His great-grandmother, Mildred Brewer, was my council vice president in East Cleveland. Now, Mildred and I didn't always get along, but we do share the same last name, her husband. I don't know if they are related to us or not, but when I knew that this was that she was Tamir's grandmother, I posted that on my Facebook page and shared that with you all who've been reading for the last several years, and it hit me hard that a 12-year-old playing in a playground could be gunned down, and Frank, as the mayor, who I had had conversations with about this during Jane Campbell's administration, when I was publishing the Cleveland Challenger, was taking such a lackadaisical approach to all of this. All of the shootings, all of the assaults, all of the criminal conduct on the part of Cleveland police officers that brought Eric Holder to this community to conduct the pattern and practice investigation of Cleveland police. The third one since 2001. Keep in mind that I was working for Mike White in 2000 and 2001 when he asked for the first U.S. DOJ investigation. And so being a special assistant to him, working with Martin Flask, Henry Guzman, the safety director, Barry Withers was in charge of he was the overall executive assistant in charge of that department. It said to me that, again, we got some real problems. So my focus then was just to express my dissatisfaction regularly on Facebook and to share as much as I could with you all about the documents, about the investigations, about discipline, about police management training. We talked about the 624 hours that police get in training, which is compared to a cosmetologist, 1,500 hours, your esthetician who does your facial, 700 hours, your nail tech, 300 hours. To see a police officer's training that low was frightening, but it was also, for me,
Okay.
I think you're gonna lose the pack.
it's not close. Oh, those players. It's a smack and go
You
up.
got the dark combo? You got the dark combo?
That's a diet combo?
Dark real cafe?
Oh, dark combo.
With the,
Yeah, this one is the combo white, regular wing. Rice, greens, macaroni.
that's not a combo, that's a special.
Can you come here?
Yes, I.
This one is fish food.
Okay, let me go to Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Brewer, for your patience. She really brought in like 5 trays of chicken and turned the whole. That's so funny.
So what the hell was that? Anyway,
Yes.
training.
The training thing.
So the training part to me was kind of a shock. I had administered oaths of office to police officers for the 4 years that I was mayor. I knew that we had training. I had looked at the training. I knew we had training officers, but I didn't realize in comparison until, I'm trying to remember her name, she was a cosmetologist. She wrote that that's fewer hours than I get to be a beautician or a cosmetologist. And I looked it up and I thought, oh, this is killing. So then I looked up real estate agents. They needed, so when I looked at the training, I went to O'Pala's website and I saw that the training was basically jumping jacks, police tactics, driving, 12 hours of law where a real estate agent needed 1,000 hours of law. And you think a police officer gets 12 hours of legal training, and now we're putting them on the streets to enforce laws they don't know anything about. I asked them when I administered oaths of office, after they were administered the oath of office, I said, you just swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Ohio. Have you read it? No. You swore to uphold federal and state criminal laws. Have you read them? No. Have you read the charter and ordinances of East Cleveland? No. So that said to me now, we got a real problem. And I kind of reflected back on those experiences, thinking that maybe Cleveland had more, and not realizing that all the police officers around the state were getting about the same level of training. So it was those types of things that just kept pushing me more and more towards covering government, sharing as much as I could with you all, reading the consent decrees, going into those documents, the first U.S. DOJ investigation, sharing that with you, the same with the third, going through, analyzing it, and actually came up with the right number that it would take to implement it under Frank's paradigm, which was about $14 million. But under mine, I could probably do it for $500,000. And believe me, it's not that difficult to retrain police if you know police management, if you know how they function. So what Frank did and the way he handled those two controversies for me, it caused me to start looking at other things that were taking place in his administration. So as I looked at that, I looked at water, I looked at the courts, I looked at some of the rulings that were coming out of the courts, I looked at the various departments, looking at the ordinances that they were passing, seeing all the ordinances with damn emergencies, hearing complaints from people about demolition, and looking at what was going on in the county land bank, the city's land bank. And it was, to me, just an administration out of control. And I started reflecting on some of the things that Frank and I used to talk about. And I've known Frank since 1982, when I used to lead the Guardian Angels here in Ohio. Frank and I met when he was a prosecutor with the city of Cleveland. And I was still leading the Guardian Angels, hadn't run for the school board yet. I wrote an ad for him when he ran the first time against Preston Terry in 1985. He won that year and took office in 86. I had run against Jeff Johnson in 84 when he was appointed after Mike White went to the state senate. Jackson had been the state senator and Mike White was the councilman in the Glendale area. Back then we had 33 wards. We were reduced from 33 down to 21. I think it was 21, it was 21. And Mike was moving up. He moved Jeff in. I just didn't think Jeff had it. And when I ran against him, I thought it made sense to run against him because I just didn't think that he was going to serve the Glendale area. He won, and he did serve the Glendale area. Big disappointment. Went to the state senate, another big disappointment. He missed 64% of the meetings in the general assembly. He had a 36% attendance rate in the general assembly. That means the board didn't show up for work. Right. As I thought about all those things and decided, it just came to me. Let me just go on. Angela Davis called me and she said, if I pull some petitions, would you run for mayor? I just got back from Atlanta and I said yes. I didn't think about it too long. And after I said yes, I said, okay, you know, that just this campaign has been interesting for a couple of reasons. I've never been lied about by reports. I've been covering government for so many years, and I've been a reporter and publisher and all of that, but I've never been lied on, manipulated, and information distorted so much as I've seen with the media covering this particular race. It's been a challenge because I had a great record in East Cleveland. I cut crime 40 to 75% in 4 years. I was the only mayor to keep the city out of fiscal emergency all 4 years of my administration. We went in January 06, February 6, 2006. They released us from fiscal emergency with no audit. Eddie Montgomery was the auditor at that time, no audit. So I asked her to do an audit before she released us. She said no, because they were just going to do it. They wanted to get us out from underneath 18 years of being in fiscal oversight by the state. So when I took office, I knew I was going to be flying blind. I knew that without an audit, I wasn't going to have any insight about what had been taking place in the past in terms of management, non-compliance issues. If we were processing paperwork timely, if we were following ordinances timely, or doing the things that we were supposed to do. So I went back to a 2001 audit and used that kind of as a template for the things that had gone on then, and still going on. And I gave all the sections to my department heads that applied to them, and then we would meet and go over these issues about their departments. And then I had to go and meet with their department employees, give them the audit, because I believe in transferring information all the way down from the top, that I shouldn't be the only one reading an audit. The department heads should read it, the employees should read it, because it affects everybody in government. And if you don't know what's wrong, and the employee workforce doesn't have an insight that there are things wrong, then you're not going to be able to correct anything and get the kind of buy-in that you need from your employees. So that was the way I kind of took that approach. I'm jumping around a little bit because I don't have a prepared statement, but the things that motivated me in this was thinking that we could elevate a discussion, have a real discussion about that. I'm an ex-mayor, so when I challenged Frank, I'm an ex-mayor, chief of staff to a mayor, special assistant to a mayor. I thought we'd have a higher level conversation. I thought we could talk about budgets and audits and management letters. I thought we could talk about collective bargaining agreements and some of the provisions in those agreements. I thought we could talk about the water department, the port authority, the airport, Cleveland Public Power, all of those things combined, and have a higher level discussion where after this campaign, people were raised up because the people participating in the debates were bringing their best game to the table. Then I get to these forums and I look at the reports from the media and I see nobody's thinking on this level, everybody's down here. I listen to the candidates talk about leadership for a management job. And it might sound good to talk about being a leader, but you're going to be a manager, and the only thing you're going to do is manage according to what you raised your right hand to swear and uphold: the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Ohio, the laws of the State of Ohio, and the federal government, and the Charter and Ordinances of Cleveland. That's it. That's the job. And if you think it's outside that, you're fooling yourself. And that's what I've been going through at these forums, listening to these candidates talk about things that have no bearing on the job itself. When I hear Kylo, and I told you I owned not Kylo, but Brandon, I own a restaurant. This young man owned a restaurant. I didn't learn a damn thing in the restaurant business that'll help me negotiate a police labor agreement. Nothing. My feet still hurt from owning a restaurant. I'll never do that again. The other things that I thought about was with Jeff and Zach and Bill in the race. They've got 30 years experience on Jeff's side. Took office in '84. Zach took office in 2000. I think it was 2000, 2001. Who was the other one? Bill Patman. He'd been in the office as a councilman, as a state representative. I'm thinking, okay, let's talk. And then I look at the level of unpreparation, the lack of preparation on the part of the candidates, and it's just been, to me, very frustrating. The reporters, the manipulation that's going on in media. Brent Larkin, number one, for the Plain Deal, he used to be the editorial pages editor. I don't know if you all know him. You know what Brent Larkin is? Brent and I have issues because I wrote that Brent was an attorney in 1995 when I was publishing the Political Reporter, and Brent used the newspaper to help a client. Then he got Allison Grant to do a front page story to beat up on this guy, then used his editorial pages to call for the guys that died. He never told anybody that he was working out of John Plamaco's law office, okay? He didn't tell anybody that, you all didn't know that. And so, I published that, and John, the guy that he was calling for his indictment, he went to jail. it took me 4 years of writing to get his ass out of jail. Dan Gall, the judge, took a look at his case after I kept pointing out all the things that were wrong. John found the right motion. Gall looked at it, let go after 4 years. But after I exposed Brent, I became persona non grata at the plain deal. Everything about me was wrong. So when I ran for mayor against Emmanuel Anyawa in East Cleveland while he was under an FBI investigation, they endorsed Emmanuel Anyawa. When I ran against Saretha Goddins, who'd spent 19 years behind a desk at Lakeside Hospital taking your x-ray requisition, telling you to follow the blue line to the blue door, which sounds like great on-the-job training for being a mayor, they endorsed Saretha Goddins. When I ran against Gary Norton, he ran the last time, Gary, he had a master's degree in public administration, but what they didn't point out is that he had 10 D's and 8 F's between Morehouse and CSU. Had been placed on academic watch, that his only management job was a management training job in Miami-Dade County, Florida. He got fired from that after less than 6 months. So from then until he ran for mayor in Cleveland, he worked as a person writing letters for the Cleveland Scholarship Foundation. He wrote letters for Barbara Bennett. He wrote, and he was Peter Lawson Jones's gopher. That truly, I'm sure you all agree, qualified him to run a $21 million municipal corporation with 280 employees. And so when he, after less than, November 2011, he took office January 1, 2010. By November 2011, he had a $5.7 million deficit. So the plain bill wasn't writing about that stuff. They weren't telling you that stuff. The Huron Hospital deal, all of that stuff was illegal. They didn't tell you that he took $8 million from Toby Cosgrove at Cleveland Clinic, did not take that money to East Cleveland City Council, spent all $8 million in $50,000 increments on contractors of his choice from a separate account. Now, if the plain bill won't tell you that, what do you think they're going to tell you about Eric Brewer and his plan to put physicians on EMS squads, or his plan to rebuild a city hospital that we used to have that was free, or a plan that I have to bring constitutional compliance to the police department? I sent them a 5-page public safety plan because I was a safety director. I know policing better than anybody that's running or has ever run for mayor. I sent that to them. The guy took my introduction, just the opening piece of the email, here's what I'm sending you, didn't go into my plan, and muted it down so that you don't really get the full scope of what it is I'm trying to do. So I've had to deal with that kind of stuff. Just think, I remember when George Voinovich ran against Dennis Kucinich. George had been the lieutenant governor, he'd been the state representative, he'd been the county auditor. So all of that experience, he runs for Cleveland's mayor, and it's like, this is the best candidate ever. Okay, I've been a mayor, special assistant to a mayor, chief of staff to a mayor, 3 jobs connected to municipal government mayors. You would think that they would say, this is the most qualified candidate to ever run for this office, even more than Voinovich, because my experience directly ties to that job. And I worked for Mike White as a special assistant, and on top of that, when Mike handed me the discipline for the police department and asked me to meet with Flask, Guzman, and Barry to go over what was happening with McGrath, giving police officers who committed crimes suspensions, written reprimands, time off, before he demoted him and moved Mary Bounds in. I'm a part of this. None of this becomes part of the dialogue that's been going on in this race, because it seems for me that they want to suppress everything I know so that you really don't get the full scope of what I have to offer. Chris Quinn pissed me off when he made a comment with Rick Jackson on Idea Stream and suggested that I'm not factual. Well, dude, I read the plain deal there. Not really be a lie. But let me just say this: if you compare your facts to mine, I'm pristine compared to those folks that they got working over there. I don't have the litigation in terms of lawsuits that have been filed against them for all the lies they've told, or the people like myself who have complained to them so much about the lies that are being told about us Every story, every news clip that has ever been produced on me has false information in it. Every single story, every single television broadcast has false information, and this is going back to 1981. Okay? So I'm saying to you that that has been a big shock for me, because I expected a bit more from the reporters covering this race and showing a higher level of discussion, since they've been doing it for so long. I mean, Brent isn't new to this. Elizabeth might be new to this, but you'd think at some point there'd be an elevation, that we have grown so much that our conversation should be up here instead of down there. Now, I don't know if you've been watching, again, the forums. I've been hearing the leadership conversation. Last night, it was all this, I'm going to do this, the feel good, I make you feel good. This is a management job, folks. And the mayor isn't going to make you feel good all the time. I told people when I was in Cleveland's mayor, every day I lose a vote because I got to tell somebody no. If I'm driving through the streets in the community and I see a contractor working, I don't see a permit in the window, East Cleveland's being cheated. Cleveland's being cheated. So if I go and say, do you have a permit? Since I'm there, why do I need to call the police? Do you have a permit? The homeowner comes out, they're pissed because I'm making their contractor get a permit. Well, get the permit, okay? And if you don't, it's going to stop. Now, I've learned that I might not do that in Cleveland. I'll send a cop, they won't even know I was there. The point is that you would expect that we could get to a point where we're elevated, and that just has not happened. And it's been frustrating. I think it's disrespectful for people to run for these offices and not prepare themselves. Yes. When Jane Campbell ran in 2001, I was editor of Cleveland Life. I was running in East Cleveland. I had left Mike's administration with a special assistant. Jane sat before me and she wanted Cleveland Life's endorsement. We had 50,000 copies going out every week to 2,000 stores. So we were a huge newspaper as far as urban market newspapers are concerned. Jane and I talked. I asked Jane, have you read the charter? No. Have you read the ordinances? No. Have you read Title 7 of the Revised Code? No. What about the Constitution of the United States in the state of Ohio? And Article 18 of the Ohio Constitution that tells you about how municipal corporations are structured. She says, what is this, a civics lesson? I said, Jane, I'm running for mayor. Have you looked at a budget and audit? Have you been to a goddamn council meeting? Okay? No. Now look at who's running. I couldn't drive, I see him in the ward. You need a lift, brother, I got you. My point is, you got 16 years. You should be a master. Imagine 16 years of going to school. You start in the first grade. You go to the 16th grade, which is your 4-year graduate degree. You should be a genius at this stuff. I'm talking their code. I know their code better than they do. Have you heard any candidate for mayor in Cleveland bring up a section of the ordinance, a section of a charter, of Ohio law, since they've been running? Do you even hear them have these conversations about legislation that they have voted on or writing? You don't hear this conversation. Yes, ma'am.
But don't you think that some of that can be attributed to the folks that attend these forums and the questions that are asked? Because people tend to focus on like the more popular questions. As far as like, you know, I know you guys at the forums have had questions about the Q deal, about the distribution of businesses and development throughout the city. So that I feel like that's a testament to what people are paying attention to in that given moment.
I moderated a forum for Kim Brown for the county council members, and we were at the Shaker Library, I believe. This was probably in 13, I think it was. So I got the names of all the candidates who were going to participate. Most of them were elected officials. So I went through the Bedford councilmen's audits. I looked at their last agenda items to see what legislation they passed. I did the same thing for everybody who was a member of the city council that was running for the county council. Same thing in Warrensville, Highland Heights, because we had people from those communities represented. So when I moderated, I knew what was going on in their local government. So one of the councilmen from Don, I think his name was, from Bedford, I asked him about an ordinance they had just passed 2 weeks ago, and he didn't know anything about it. I asked about some of the other issues that were going on in their communities that they didn't know anything about. Even, I believe, Lynn Ruffner, she died. She was Shaker Heights Vice President of the City Council. Ronnie Dunn, the professor at CSU, had done a report showing that 85% of citations issued in Shaker Heights were the dark-complected black males, and most of them were driving under suspension. And so I asked Lynn about this misuse of leads in her police department that I knew from that information from Ronnie that I had prepared for as a moderator. So to me, it's not the questions from the audience, it's how prepared the moderators are and how diligently they are performing those duties to try to enlighten and bring everybody up. It's a tougher, it requires a little bit more work, but that's just how I work. I don't know any other way to work but to get that level of preparation for every single thing I do. And so for me, we're being cheated because I think we have gotten into a culture of very lazy intellectual habits. You know, in my generation, I'm 63, you know, we wrote, we didn't type, we didn't have keyboards, we didn't have cell phones, we wrote and in cursive. How many of you all know how to write in cursive? You can't write in cursive? Okay. Now I know right now, you don't write in cursive? Okay. Now I know right now they're not teaching that. Right. Now I think they're starting to teach that again in the schools, but there's a generation that won't even know that. Right. It was cheating when I was a kid to use a calculator to do math. Yep. It was cheating. We had to know up here. Right. Now you get passed for using a stinking calculator. So it's degraded the intellect by not making people think the same way that my generation thought. And what's frightening to me is that there's going to be subsequent generations coming when I'm dead, long dead, that won't even know that these are things that are missing. Mm-hmm. And that's what's scaring me at this point, is that we're having a degradation. When I see candidates who have as much experience as these candidates running for office, who cannot cite any aspect of their governing documents, it is terrible for me. When Zach talks about 400 cops, and he hasn't even done a preliminary budget to see what it costs, when he's talking about 400 cops without going from 624 hours of training to 1,000 hours of training, and at least a minimum of 500 hours of legal training before you put an officer on the street with a gun to be able to arrest people and use their testimony to put people behind bars, I think it's an abomination if we don't have excellence as part of our municipal workforce. And so we've got to rethink the things that we're doing and elevate ourselves up rather than allow ourselves to be dumbed down. That's the part that's scaring me about where we're going. Frank and I worked well together. I'm glad Frank cut the deal with us so that we could have a direct service agreement and Cleveland would take care of our water, well, sell water to our residents at the same rate that they were selling it to Cleveland residents. It was a great deal for East Cleveland residents. They saved about 35 to 40% on their water and sewer bills. I was glad to do that for them. But when we got to the point where we had to sign the agreement at the Martin Luther King Civic Center, and we toasted, and I grabbed the glass, I'm like, is this Lake Erie water? Is it filtered? Is it drinking? It's good. Anyway, as we were going into what the elements of the agreement were, it was apparent to me that during those 22 months that it took us to get the deal done, that I had been in all the meetings. I had met with the employees, his employees, my employees. I had read all the documents. So when we get to the signing, Frank's got to explain the deal, and everything he said was wrong. Everything. And so when I got a chance to speak, I had to come back and correct every wrong thing he'd said. A month after we took office, we met to discuss issues of mutuality. I'm sitting in the office, we both new mayors, a month in office. Now you don't know what that feeling is like, but let me just say this. I thought I walked around with a lollipop on my ass because it got kissed that much being married. Wow, why are you kissing my ass? But it was an interesting dynamic, and so you kind of on this high that you know, Frank and I were both on that new mayor high. And you know, we got all these employees and so-called power, which is not power, just responsibilities. And we're talking in the mayor's office. And I'm like, man, I got all these documents. Can you believe I got contracts? I found where the chief of police that I ultimately fired had initiated an investigation on me after I was working in the Annuar administration because somebody called, and whose last name was Brewer, and she said it was my sister. So she was going to put it in the file just in case they needed an investigation of me because somebody named with the same last name as mine, which was not my sister's first name, either anywhere close to it. I'm thinking this is crazy, but my law director gave me a copy of that. So I'm kind of on geek mode at that point. I got all these documents. I can go down to the police station, walk in, open the door. They see me coming, open the door. I'm going to the jail, talk to the prisoner. I can do anything I want. And Frank and I are in there having this conversation. I said, Frank, I'm reading everything. I got all these records, I'm reading everything. Because as a journalist, I've been begging for access to records, making public records requests that you don't get from these government agencies. Now I got control of it, I'm in heaven. Frank said, man, it's too much to read. I said, Frank, let me tell you, man, from what I think, from what I've been seeing, because in East Cleveland, I don't have all of that bureaucracy to have layers between me and my department heads. So I had to be a manager. I had to be up close with every single department head and every single department so I could understand what was going on, because ultimately it was going to be me. I didn't have a chief of staff. We couldn't afford a chief of staff. So I had to be the mayor and my chief of staff. I had to work. I'm putting in 60, 70 hours a week. And if you've been reading my posts, you know I wake my ass up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Actually, I wake up at 2 and be finished about 3 or 3:30 with what I'm posting. But my point again is that that wasn't happening with Frank's administration, and my concern was that it was being transferred to his department heads. And ultimately what I'm seeing today is they're making mistakes after 12 years in office that they should not be making if they had, when they first went in office, read just a few documents. If Frank had read the collective bargaining agreement with the police, CPPA, in 2006, he would have a better agreement in 2012. He wouldn't have that piece in there from Mike White from 1995. It's just a letter where Mike allowed the police union president to be paid as a patrol officer while doing union duties. Well, it's illegal to pay a public employee to perform duties that aren't connected to the job. It's theft in office. It's fraud. But they've allowed this with not only the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association, which I would never have done. Frank has now extended it to the other 32 public employee unions. So now I walk in and I got 33 union bosses who are city employees who are not doing employee jobs, they're doing union jobs. Now, what they got on the side are businesses. So they can run a business on the side. They can do their job on the side. I'm telling you, I take a different approach to this, and it's one of the things that bothered me when I have been looking at these 12-year later decisions and seeing where Frank, if he had simply read, his department heads had simply read, if they'd done their homework, we wouldn't be here today. And that's in every single department. I saw a $340,000 contract change order in the water department that one of the employees did on his own without going before city council, even the mayor, to get approval to do it. That employee should have been prosecuted. I hate to put people in that position, but he should have been prosecuted because it was illegal. He stole $340,000 from the residents of Cleveland. That's what I think is missing here, is again, that level of insight, the study, the diligence on the part of elected officials to have some level of mastery about the governing the documents and the bureaucracy that they are going to control. I sat with a state rep candidate a couple of years ago. This was frightening. Dude's running for state rep, and I want to fight for jobs, equal employment opportunities. I said, have you read the revised code? He said, what's that? Running for state rep. He said, what's that? I'm not going to mention his name because he's a nice young man. So I sat down with him for an hour at a computer and pulled up the revised code and explained it to him. Because this is what you're going to be changing and amending and voting on as a state rep or a state senator. These things are basic. It's a disrespect for the office if candidates running don't prepare themselves. It's what I have said For the last 5 years on my Facebook page, while I keep saying to you all, Ohio Revised Code, your charter, your ordinances, the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Ohio, those things are your governing documents. They are what you gotta have. And let me segue a little bit into my plans. If you got any questions, I'll take them at this point.
What's your intake on
For judge, I'm voting on it.
No. Is he one of the mayor candidates?
Oh no, Mike's running for judge.
Oh,
He's running for judge.
Judge.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm voting for Mike.
So, what is your political strategy? You mentioned that like everything that is being told by the media about you is a lie. So what is your political strategy to circumvent that?
Well, next week we'll be putting out 100,000 copies of the newspaper, the Cleveland Challenger, which will be bigger than the Plain Dealer in Cleveland. They only circulate about 20,000 papers inside the city. So we're going to be bigger than them next week, and I'll get my message out. I don't have a problem with that. But what else I've been doing is every time they tell a lie, I call them on it. I do not let them get away with a lie, and I share it with my friends on Facebook. I'll take their emails, I'll take their lies, I'll dissect it, I'll put it up and print screen it, I'll let you see it, I'll send it to every reporter in town and let them see it. They are quite afraid of me because I know a lot about them, and I said to them, you want to get into my personal business? Do you want me to get into yours? Because I will. I'll put them on the front page of my paper just like they put me out there. So they've been a little bit more thoughtful about how they're covering me. Because when I leave here, I'm not going to be besmirched and have that crap lingering out there. Right. So my strategy is what I've been doing. Continuing to dialogue with my Facebook friends, continuing to call them out when they lie, demanding that they are accurate, because even as a public figure, New York Times versus Sullivan does not protect you if you did not check to make sure that you were factually accurate about a public figure. And I can show malice in many of these instances. But I'm not doing that. I like the other approach, that kind of smack them around approach.
But are enough people watching to notice that that's what you're doing?
I don't think, how many people really read the Plain Dealer in Cleveland.com here? I mean, really?
It takes 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a newsletter.
I look at those articles, I see 0 likes, 0 shares, 0 comments, and I'm done. They don't have any.
You're not worried about that publishing or not letting people you're trying to say. It doesn't
I'm not worried about.
so you're not, so essentially because the thing is always redistributed as much as it used to be, you're not concerned with what they say.
I used to write for the Cleveland Press. I was a reporter for the Cleveland Press. We had 2 daily newspapers in Cleveland. The Plain Dealer at that point was about, I think we were about 280,000 circulation. The Plain Dealer was about the same. And the Press was an afternoon daily. The Plain Dealer was the morning daily. So we were always in a competitive news environment. And the way I operate, even when I worked for the Call of Post for W.O. Walker, when it was the 5th largest black-owned newspaper in America, 110 employees, only 5 papers that had a printing press. He was one of those. He had 5 editions statewide. We were huge as far as the black press was concerned. But the mission at that point was to take the information that we were getting from the Plain Dealer that might have been disparaging about our community and just rework it, tell people the truth. You have to keep pounding people with the facts. Ultimately, they pick it up. But the Plain Dealer has gone down in circulation so much, I don't think it's relevant. When I see the people who comment, most of them are from the suburbs. I can really give a shit.
Also, sorry.
You live in the suburbs?
I'm just kidding.
Why are you here?
Whoa.
I'm only kidding. But the idea is that I'm kind of focusing on right here. And some of the assets that I think I got is this. I've been in this town. My family will have 100 years here in 5 years. 100 years. My grandmother and my uncles and aunts, they all grew up here. Except for my grandparents were from the Carolinas on my father's side. My grandfather bought 3 trucks for my father and my uncles, and 2 uncles in 1951. My grandmother was Theodore Williams' good friend. He was he was the 2nd black judge on the Theo Linsky, Sheila Jean Capers, all those people. My family's been very political. My dad ran against George Forbes in 1971, and so I've been here. I know this community. I've done a lot. Published 12 newspapers. I have been a reporter for the Cleveland Press, the Cleveland Post. I've had 3 radio shows. WRMR, WDMT, WDMT was 108 at the time, WERE, and WRMR AM 850. I think that's now WTAM. That's 1100. But I had that kind of presence. You Google my name on the Plainville archives for the newspapers. There's 139 references to my name from 1991. That doesn't include the other 250 from 1991 till now. There's 250 references to my name in the Cleveland Post up until 1985. I've been covered. I got 17,000 votes when I ran for council. School board in Cleveland in 83. All those people aren't dead. Most of them are like me, old, but they're still here. I was on the front page of every major newspaper in the state during the early 80s with the Guardian Angels. All of my newspapers have been pretty much Cleveland-based. One newspaper I mailed to 197,000 households in 2003. And it just isn't the radio shows that I've done, it's other shows I've appeared on. Mort Downing was here before Jerry Springer. And I was on Mort's shows in the early 80s. I've done everything statewide for years. When Ken Blackwell ran for governor, you all might remember the commercial I did in 06, that you have to be boo-boo the fool to think that a black man could steal an election in America and not get locked up.
Right.
That was a statewide commercial I did. And so I've got that kind of name recognition. I'm kind of on the Carl Stokes era, where Carl and I were on the ballot in 83 when he ran for judge. Carl won, he got 57,000 votes, he spent $1,100. I said, Carl, how did you do this? He said, Eric, I have 100% name recognition. Either you like me or you don't. Either you're going to vote for me or you're not. And that's kind of where I am. I think most people who have mentioned Zach's name, it's only his troubles. The same thing with Jeff. You don't know what they've done. They don't have a list of accomplishments. There's not people that says, hey, you used to run the Miles Drive-In, like when Mariah and I were out over on Union a couple of weeks back. There's a young man that I hired who's now 55 years old, but I hired him at 17 for the Miles Drive-In. I had a bunch of kids working for me at the Miles Drive-In. I've forgotten he was out there. But that's what I think I got going on, that kind of long-time goodwill. How many people did you think we saved from harassment downtown, broke up fights? How many in the articles that I've written? I've always given a voice to voiceless people. So if you had a problem with government, you came to me in my newspapers so you could articulate. I've had police officers try to kill me because of things that I've written about them in my newspapers. I'm not making this up. This is a reality. I've had to report these incidents to the sheriff because there's no point in contacting CPD. But I will deal with them a little differently when I'm in office. But because I've done this and I've irritated so many officials for the people, I think I've got a pretty good relationship with the people. I'm not really worried. I'm not going to spend a lot of money on this campaign. I'm just being honest with you. And it's been interesting to me that they're showing me is showing up in the polls. There's a poll showing me right behind Frank. I ain't spent out of pocket of about $5,000. That was just to get them damn 3,000 signatures. That was the hardest part of the campaign for me. 3,000 signatures. All right.
Okay, we're gonna shift back a little bit to platform and focus. Let's talk about, since you're gonna be running for the mayoral seat, if you are elected, how are you going to deal with our school system? Because as we know, our school system is failing our children. They don't have the programs that they need. We're losing them to the streets because they don't have the same programs that we had when we were in school. How do you, what direction are you going to take to fix that problem?
Well, a couple of things. I'm going in, and I don't know where Eric Gordon's contract is in terms of, how many years he's got left, but he's out of here.
Same thing with those people on the school board. I think it's an abomination to have a corporate-controlled school board. I see PNC Bank, I see the big law firm employees serving on our school board. I think that is wrong. We have $1 billion going into education. When I ran for a school board in '83, we had $600 million, $650 million, 125,000 students, and we had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 100 buildings plus. Today we got 36,000 students and $1 billion. That makes no sense to me. That's $27,777 per student. These kids should be geniuses. So I'm definitely going to make a change in the leadership. That's where I got to start. The other piece I'm going to do is there's a provision in Title 33 of the revised code that allows the mayor, the law director for the municipal corporation, to be the law director for the school district. So I'm going to take over the legal functions of the school district through the law department of the city of Cleveland. That's going to shut down the school district's independent mortgage. Now, what does that do? My law director is also the chief prosecuting attorney. So now that puts me in control through my law department of the contracts that are being awarded for legal fees, the contracts that are going out for the other things that are taking place, and it brings the expense of running that department away and creates a closer alignment between the city government and the school district government, and puts the mayor a little bit more involved, not in the daily management, that's the superintendent's job, don't even want to think about doing that. But I want to have the kind of oversight that says that if you guys are going in the wrong direction, the law director is going to say, oh no, you're not disobeying this law. You're not going to award this contract. You're not going to pay this law firm $800 an hour to do things that we can have city lawyers doing for their $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 salaries. We're moving in that direction. As far as programs, I've been playing trumpet since I was 9 years old. I'm 63. I got 54 years of playing trumpet. And if you heard me sing, hello, man, Seth. If you heard me sing a little bit of the Ready for the World over there, you know, I sang on stage with the Four Tops and the Shy Lights. I played in 5 bands. And that all came from learning music at 9 years old, beginning in the 3rd grade in public schools. We used to have those programs, we gotta go back to it. Yes. But we can't keep taking money out and giving it to these high-paid administrators, letting the teachers and everybody else get these union contracts, nice and lucrative, great, but we're not getting what we're supposed to get for our kids. I think it was an abomination for the state to take away the right of Cleveland voters to select their school board. I think it has to go back to the voters. I will work towards that. I don't know that you're going to do a great job in terms of some of the candidates, because you pick who runs, just like you do in all these other races. You're limited to who decides to put their name in the ring. I'll do those kinds of things. Mariah, I wrote 5 charter school applications for a client. I think I've got a lot of experience at this. I also served on the Financial Planning and Supervision Commission to oversee the East Cleveland School District out of fiscal emergency. They had a $20 million deficit. They were $20 million in deficit. They had actually taken a $12 million surplus, the East Cleveland School Board. They took a $12 million surplus and created a $20 million deficit in 5 years with it, without having any bump up in academic performance for the students. So that just basically says money doesn't work. We got them out of fiscal emergency, but they're still under oversight, but we got them through the first leg for the first 2 years that I was there. We had to scrutinize everything, change all the contracts, get rid of some people that were there. I'm going to focus on the business because that's what I have an interest in, but I'll bring in a superintendent that will focus on the academics. I'm very big on vocational education. The first group I spoke to in my life, I don't want to use the word professionally, but this is 77. President Carter had a Poor People's Forum, and read a book written by Grant Penn, who had been Lyndon Johnson's Undersecretary of Education. It's called Manpower and Education. Manpower, education, and work, something like that. Anyway, we talked about that 94% of the students who graduate from high school don't go to college, and of the 6% who do, only a tiny percent of them get a 4-year degree. Most of them drop out the first, second, third years. So So we're spending 94% of our education dollars teaching kids to go to college, and we should be spending 94% on the vocational ed track. And maybe not that high, but we have to go in a different direction. I also see changes in licensing on the state law side, because from my point of view, we used to have lawyers that were apprentices in this nation. You can go work for a lawyer for 5 years and go take the bar. We don't have there are only 2 states now, California and Virginia. So I would like to take a look on the larger side of things that we could do to kind of get people into the workforce earlier, so that children don't have to think they got to graduate from high school and then go to college so they can get a job. They can get what they need in high school. Since we're spending all the money and elevate them, if they want to they want to go from high school to law, they should be able to go right from high school to law, take their 3 years, and be done at 21 as a lawyer and go on and make some money. That's where I'm at. Go ahead.
That was actually the perfect segue into my question, because my question was, in Cleveland, thinking about the balance between attracting young millennials, usually young white millennials, but also providing the job training for young people that are already living here, so that they can live successful lives as well. So you kind of alluded to what you're going to do as far as training and preparation, but what about the balance between making this attractive city where young people want to come and live, but understanding the realities of the majority of Cleveland?
You know, I got to tell you, I'm pissed that 82% of Cleveland's workforce are non-Cleveland residents. 82%. And the idea, you got a question?
I was kind of thinking that Chinese law.
That's
Kind of repealed Chinese law.
That's repealed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing that Frank screwed up. So I'll go into that too. So 82% of our workforce doesn't live in the city. We had residency laws in 1982 that I voted on. And council had no other authority but to enforce. So that when the state finally decided no on residency in 2007, we should have had a 100% Cleveland resident workforce. Then we could say, okay, well, y'all can go ahead and get rid of the law, but we got 100% of our workforce as Cleveland residents. What I intend to do is add value to being a resident so that it's an attraction. Think about this. Imagine a free city hospital system. That means that if you're a resident under this law that is 60 years old, 749-01, the Ohio Revised Code, passed October 1st, 1953, a little over a month before I was born. Frank Lausch was the governor. That law allowed council to pass a tax of $1 for 1,000 property value, $50 per year on a $50,000 home for free hospital care. Now we got free hospitals. What does that do for the residency? What does it do as a resident? It adds value. It puts money back in your pockets because now you don't need to carry a private insurance carrier. We can provide you with prescription drugs by buying in bulk as a city department and giving you a slight markup on those drugs using VA prices. I go to VA. Thank God I served my country and spent a year in Thailand during the end of the Vietnam War. I don't pay for prescriptions, and when I've had to pay, it's only been $2. I'm good on that. So if we can do that for everybody else, that means that the value of being a resident of Cleveland for the residents is heightened. You got the highest level of healthcare. That's why I keep talking about mobile clinics, the 5 emergency rooms, and putting physicians on EMS squads, which they do in Israel. I just learned that the other day at the City Club Forum. This Jewish doctor approached me afterwards. Every doctor that I meet who hears that, they give me a card. I would love to work on that plane. So this doctor handed me his card and he said, I love it because they do the same thing in Israel. He said it just makes sense. So now we add value to being a resident. You're a young family, you can have your babies. You can get your medical treatment. If you are an employer and you hire a Cleveland resident whose medical care is already covered, why would you hire somebody from another community if you got to pay for their medical benefits? If we've got that built into residency, the value to Cleveland is going to drive businesses here. It's going to drive people to live here, and we will have a model city that everyone will want to live in. That's what my mind is, and it's affordable. It's spending $3 million on a dirt bike track. I can hire 20 physicians on that money. 20 physicians I can hire on that kind of money. Think about the youth thing that Frank is doing, that little money they carved aside. And I want you all to think about this as well. This is why I'm so big on the code. It's not my job to come up with new things to spend public dollars on. It's not. It's not my job to come up with a youth intervention program. It's not my job to come up with an immigration office like Brandon wants. That's not my job. My job is to take your tax dollars and apply them to increasing your quality of life in Cleveland. Now, what does that mean? It means if I can stop the police by giving them more training from all the litigation that's coming from civil rights cases, that's more money for you. If I enforce the section of the charter that says that you can't work any more than 48 hours in a week unless it's an extraordinary emergency, that means that when your shift is over, don't tell me that you didn't finish your freaking report, okay? And I'm gonna give you hours of overtime, 3 hours of overtime and time and a half, so you can double your salary as a police officer. The thing that they got pissed off with me about in East Cleveland is I got $100,000 cops, I got $100,000 firefighters, and I'm thinking, how the frick am I paying you this kind of money? Okay? I got deputy chiefs scheduling themselves for overtime that a firefighter should have been doing, and instead of them working the squad like a firefighter, I'm paying the deputy chief's wages at $1,400 for a 24-hour day instead of $800 for a 24-hour day. Okay? So it's understanding the management of this government to save money, put it right back into you, cut the waste out of the school district, put that money right back into the kids, and you just keep adding value on top of value because you say, where's my damn drink?
Right there.
I'm thirsty.
Thank you.
What are you doing, Mariah?
Any other questions?
Yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, your question was about. Okay, so the Fannie Lewis law. Now go here. The repeal of the Fannie Lewis law was born out of ACTA. Frank doesn't know that. Council doesn't know that. Don Pasquale, a little over a year ago, before he decided to leave the mayor's office, Don and I knew each other, decided that they had a $1.4 billion sewer project they needed to do in Akron. So he wanted to hire Akron residents. But the council they were on board with it, but he was having some battles with his council. So he thought about putting a city construction company together to hire Akron residents. And then they came back, the council said they wouldn't fund it. So then he came back and it was really frustrating because he's trying to bring 40% residents to this $1.4 billion project, and he's not able to get his governing partners to support it. So ultimately he left, but the contractors were pissed because of what he was trying to do. So they went down to Southern Ohio, they found a state senator to introduce a bill to repeal all of these charter provisions that allow residency. What Frank should have done, if he had been a more diligent mayor going to the statewide mayor's meetings like I used to do, the 26-member urban mayor coalition that I was a member of.
It's Chicken and Chuck's County night. We do comedy every Thursday night here. Chicago State.
Wait, what were you talking about?
So Frank watched that. Frank watched it. Because of this. I just don't think he pays attention the way he should. That's not concern. I can't do that now. Yeah, because residency has been abolished. Here's what I can and will do. I got 2 people I've already given promises to about jobs. One is safety director, and the other is HR director. My HR director is is an attorney. He's got county and school HR experience, labor relations. That gives me the school piece as well. So he's really beefed up. I got a good person in HR. And here's what I told him. I'm just going to be very blunt about it. I'm going to hire Cleveland residents. And I'm making a residency decision. I don't need a law to make a decision to hire residents of Cleveland. And I'm going to hire Cleveland residents. Now, if I put your application aside as a suburbanite and you don't get hired, what you going to say? I discriminated against you? Okay. What's the basis of your complaint? Was it race, age, sexual orientation, national origin, religion, handicap? I don't see anything in any discrimination law that says suburbanite is a protected class citizen. So I can make residency decisions. Zach said, I can't do that. Zach doesn't know the charter, codified ordinances, the administrative code, and because you don't know these things, you can't be a good manager to know what you can do if you haven't done your homework. That's why I just keep pushing that, folks. The homework is important. So I will make residency decisions and hire Cleveland residents. And I'm not going to apologize. When I promote, I will look for Cleveland residents first. All my cabinet members will be Cleveland residents. I expect that when you pick up a phone and call a director, that person's going to live in Cleveland and they're going to be receptive to your concerns because they're going through the same thing. And I'll tell you why. I hired a finance director in East Cleveland because you don't have that many options for finance directors in municipal finance. Ron Brooks was my finance director. He lived in Norton, Ohio, outside Akron. So my service director, we got that beautiful park that used to be John D. Rockefeller's estate. It was over 700 acres. When John D. owned it, it was cut down to 288 acres between East Cleveland and Cleveland Heights. East Cleveland got the side where his mansion was, 188 acres. The other 80 or so went over to Cleveland Heights. They got the backyard, not even the backyard, but way back in the woods yard. But I drove through the park because I lived next door. Grass was this tall. So I'm beating up my service director while he's in the grass cut because I'm walking the park. I don't want to see wolves and deer, and we got wild turkeys. For the guy, I started to have this Thanksgiving. But we had all of that going on in the park, and the service director couldn't get the finance director to give him $1,200 to buy, I think it's a brush hog that you drive on the back of a trailer to cut the grass when it's that tall. So I said, what's the problem? He says, the finance director, Ron, won't let it go. So I got Ron, I got the service director, Mike, I can't think of Dwight's last name. Got him in my car, let's go. We drove over to the park. Ron had never been to the damn park. He looks at the grass, oh man, this is terrible. Oh my God, we gotta do something. Thank you. This is what he's been asking you for the last couple of months. Get it done. I got you, Mayor. Okay, I'll make it work. You gotta have that in government. You gotta have people that are responsive to your concerns, answering the phones. I live on Leonard Parade, heartless felons territory. I'm not bullshitting when I tell you that. I've had 5 double homicides on my street. Two double homicides and 1 regular homicide. I don't even want to call it that. It's disrespectful to the life loss. But 1 single homicide, and if you've been reading my posts, you know, I said, oh, shots fired, on my street, over on Dove, that car that was hijacked and carjacked in Lakewood, it ended up behind John Adams. I walked over there, showed you all that Lexus. That's my neighborhood, okay? I'm afraid to walk at night. Not because I'm afraid of my neighbors, but because I'm afraid of getting shot by some fool that might just start randomly shooting. And think about this too, we got mentally ill people in this town with guns. Mentally ill people with guns. We don't even think about the mentally ill being armed, but we have armed, mentally ill people. They are walking around these streets unmedicated, armed. No one's checking on them to see that they're taking their medication because many of them don't have family support systems. And so they hear something and they shoot. Think of a person living in their home who's 80 plus years old with dementia, no family support system, and they hear a noise in the front thinking somebody's breaking in, and they start shooting. I've seen police reports like this. And so for me, you got to have that proximity to the people that are serving and going to work for the city.
For a time when we clearly police department that had people that were hard at work, patrolling where they lived.
Yes.
So that they knew the community front back. They had a stake.
Yeah. When I was growing up, that was pretty much your police lived in the city. I mean, Joe Dixon, for example, in East Cleveland, was the first black police officer. He lived in East Cleveland. The firefighters, white, black, everybody lived in the city. When I grew up in public housing in East St. Louis, my second grade teacher lived in the next building over from us. Okay? One of the sergeants for the police department lived a couple of doors and a couple of buildings away. We had people in the community. We paid more money, and we started letting folks go. And we didn't put the controls, and we didn't keep the value in the city. I think what's been going on is that the city is constantly devalued, and it just hasn't been a good place for a lot of people to want to live.
I appreciate your email. And one of the things that he responded that also they have done is that when you come out of the academy, you can protect where you are.
Right.
That's what I heard that a lot of people. Back when I was good, it made more sense. And a person, they're controlling what it does. And they're going to ask them.
But when you have a workforce that's 82% non-criminal residents in the police department, there's not going to be a picking where they live, although there are some who pick where they live. The only concern that I would have about that, because we think cops are just going to do the right thing, right? All the time. They're just such law-abiding citizens, they will never do anything wrong. But what we know, and what I know, is that they do drugs, they're alcoholics, they smoke crack, they do weed, they shoot heroin, just like everybody else. They got the same problems as everyone else. And so, if you're in the neighborhood that you grew up in, the guy that you went to high school with is the drug dealer, what's your likelihood of busting your boy? That's kind of the problems that I see with part of that. But I don't want people, I don't like this distance from Cleveland being 4 counties away. It was not a firefighter, what was it? Zook? Jason worked for me in East Cleveland. He was our lieutenant. But the firefighters, chief, lived in outside Canton. So I gotta pay you a big SUV vehicle to drive 60 miles each way, and I'm putting $2-3 a gallon of gas. I wasn't feeling it. I couldn't take the vehicle from them because it was with the last chiefs, and I didn't want them to say I was discriminating between chiefs. But the idea that we were so distant from the community just isn't gonna work for us. We gotta do better in terms of bringing people closer to home. And I'm gonna say this about the engineer too, that we just got sold out on by the GCC. I'm gonna say just like that, they scammed us. They told us that we were gonna get that ordinance voted on. They didn't tell us they were using this to come up with a deal. They told us we were gonna have a vote as to whether or not the $88 billion is spent from Cleveland to renovate Q. That's the only thing we were told. That's what that referendum was about. But the pastor who pushed this from Shaker Heights, the other one who got to lives in Garfield Heights. The other pastor who's supporting them lives in Shaker Heights but has a church in Oakwood. There's too much interference from suburbanites in Cleveland's business. And we gotta get everybody but Clevelanders out of our business, folks. And I'm being as real as I can about it, which is why I'm not going to hire anybody as a department head who's not a resident of Cleveland. I'm just not gonna do it. There's too many people making decisions about our city that have no connection to the city, and the decisions that they're making are benefiting them, not us. Yes, sir.
What responsibility do we have, and what responsibilities leadership has when it comes to what we just talked about people expressing their opinion about what needs to go on in Cleveland? And I'll give you the 5 to 15 to 1. The people, especially that always don't live in Cleveland, why are they concerned about if we make $15 and they live in Armor or Lakewood or what have you? same thing with the Q deal. In its inception was a good deal, but for some outside, as you just explained, interference to deal with tech. Now we don't, I think it is doing, it's the best thing we could have got out of it. Because the original deal is not there. What comes out of the second deal, God knows what it is.
There's nothing in it. Well, here's what we can do. First of all, we can't accept everybody that says they want to represent us. And we got to call them out. You know, and I'm not trying to be funny, but I didn't think Reverend Colvin was going to go down that way. I'm disappointed. Okay. I'm as blunt about that as I can. I didn't expect it. When I worked with the Colvin, we had the ability to do that kind of stuff. We don't have no things that I will continue to do is use my Facebook page. I will use the city's TV channel, TV 20. I'm a communicator, you know, from media. I'm going to use media in a different way than everybody else. And on top of that, since we do have a printing press downstairs in the Cleveland, in the basement of Cleveland City Hall, I'm going to be printing my ass off.
Okay. Mr. Brewer, I have a question. What does 6 months of the Eric Brewer mayoral administration look like?
So the 6 months under my administration, first week I will be issuing and putting through my safety director to the Cleveland Police that all of these random license plate searches are over. You will not be driving through Cleveland after week 1 and having police officers racially profiling most of you and running your license plates to see if you have warrants, driving under suspension, or that kind of stuff. That's week 1. That's week 1. Okay? Week 1. 6 months from then, you'll have more information. You'll have a meeting within the first month to discuss the Free City Hospital plan. To talk about that. We're going to push that first month. I started on the water deal. I made a promise to East Cleveland residents when I ran for mayor in 2005 that within 90 days I would have a plan to lower your water and sewer rates. I took office January 1st. The first meeting I had with the residents was January 5th. We had 400 people show up. Within 90 days, as promised, I had a plan. Within 22 months, I had a deal signed. So that's what I will be doing, Larry, is those things that I committed to. I'm taking it in day 1, week 1, month 1, and focusing on that. I'm going to start, there'll be changes in the upper management of all the departments. There'll be more information coming out to you as a citizen, because I'm a journalist first. I'm sorry, I cannot be a politician first. I'm a journalist first, so I believe you have a right to know damn near everything that's going on in City Hall. When I was covering James Cameron's administration, I used to make public records requests for email. So if you want to look at my email, I'm not going to have my foreign stuff up here.
God.